a solar panel that gave out hardly anything. I found one. It was so beautifully built. I pulled it off a van, stainless steel frames, glass. I thought, wow, I want to make this on a table. It's just so beautiful. But it would have cost a fortune. The panels I like are 340 watts, and that's 1 by 2 meter panel. That is an enormous amount of power. That was the first single panel I put on our bus. We did Norway, Sweden, and in Sweden our alternator broke completely, and it didn't make any difference. I had the vehicle battery linked to the leisure battery. They were all being charged tip-top every day, never missed a beat. So that's the thing I specialise in, is big panels, because you can fit that and you can spend a few years growing into it. Quick question. What was the what? Oh, the panel? Oh, I've got no idea. I know a geezer in the New Forest, and I'll go along and, pick them up from there. And he doesn't advertise them because they're really nice panels, so he's kind of keeping them. And I'm just slowly wearing himself down. What? Anyway, yeah, we decided we like driving around that much. We got caught in a heat wave, and got a bit sweaty. So we decided to put aircon on, and we wanted that to run off-grid, obviously, because not that we're antisocial, we just don't like people, and definitely not campsites. So we're never on hookup. Now, you look at these panels, and they have wonderful figures like 340. But the reality is, you're never going to get that out unless you have perfect conditions, which you're never going to get. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't realise at all. You're in the desert, midday, on the equator, the sun is right above you, so everything you think is perfect condition. But guess what? You're only getting about 75% out. Why is that? Because the panel in the sun has got so hot, the resistance has gone through the roof, and it's throttling the output. The best output I've had, oddly enough, was winter, when the panel was cool. The sun was at a pretty poor triangulation, so again, you've got the trigonometry of where the sun is. When you go up to Scotland, wow. It's difficult because the sun only gets that high, which effectively reduces the size of your panel. And it's significant. So the aircon unit is 700 watts of 240 volt AC. So by my reckoning, I reckon I needed double that to power it on solar. So that's 1400 watts. So that's what I did. And it works. Not only that, I have a deep freeze which does take quite a current, because that works hard all the time. I've got an electric fridge as well, but to be honest, that hardly does anything. I know some of you know I've got a washing machine on board. To be fair, that doesn't use a lot of power, but it did need a little bit of choking and fiddling. But anyway, so if you're considering solar, I have seen a huge number of horrible installations for a whole load of reasons. I'm not a big fan of these flexi panels. They're lovely and light, and I love the lightness of them, but I've seen an awful lot of them with they break at the connector, and then you've got to scrape these things off without tearing your roof and start again. They're expensive. Again, I don't like them, but that's a personal choice. The frame panel ones, they're easy to replace. Anything goes wrong, you just get it off. Right, so solar, trying to figure out how much people want. It's a really difficult one. This really comes, what you need depends how you use your van. Some people might just need 150 watts just to keep things topped up a little bit while they go to campsites or do the odd weekend away. But that can make a big difference if you're doing it summer or winter. If you're a light power user, but you use it in the winter if you're parked up for extended periods, you might want more than you think. we were out in Storm Cannon, and I was absolutely genuinely shocked at how little. I was getting about 1.5 amps out of a 1400 watt system during that storm in the middle of the day. You know, we don't realise our eyes also adjust, so we can still see. We think it's bright. It's not necessarily. So that's another consideration. When you've got 300 watts of solar, or 250 plus, you really want a second battery, because you want to be able to store it. The other thing about having a second battery is, again, a thing a lot of people don't realise is batteries have a short lifespan. You can cycle them down 200 times and then that's it. They're tired, they're not effective. And cycling, getting to 12.2 volts makes me nervous, because that is touching on a cycle. So, you know, if your battery is reading 11.5 volts, you're hurting it. They don't like being pulled down. I mean, I know they say leisure battery are deep cycle. Not really. You're not changing the chemistry. And you pay a lot more for it. I use starter batteries, always have, always will. Again, personal choice. When you've got 300 watts and 2 leisure batteries, and you're a light user, it's a good thing to consider banking the vehicle battery. Because when you've got that amount of daily power, you can afford to use your engine battery as well as the others, and again, you're sharing the load. Oh yeah, another thing people talk about is, oh, when you get batteries, they've got to come from the same batch and be made at the same temperature. I'm sorry, rubbish. Batteries of a similar size are fine. You can bank them together, they don't care if they're young or old. The only thing that's important is that the chemistry is the same. So I stick with flooded cells. I like them. They're easy, cheap, available. AGMs, gels, these things, you pay a lot more for them. I don't really see the advantage. But they charge at different rates, and this is important. So if I forget to mention it, when I get onto the actual controllers, someone remind me. So connecting the vehicle battery to your leisure bank, simplest way of doing that is with an isolator switch, and the nice thing about that, and I'll get to that in a second, is you can actually start your engine off your leisure bank if you need to. That's why I originally built the system, but in the end I just left it permanently plugged in, and it's just stayed like that forever. And it was interesting because I actually, for whatever reason, disconnected it and realised that my engine battery was absolutely knackered and probably been ruined for about 6 months. But hey ho. The other thing you can do is split charge type thing. I don't really like split charges overly because they tend to lose a bit of voltage. Battery charging is a really crucial thing as well, which is why it's important to get a really decent controller and a charger. That little blue box over there, that's typical to what a lot of us have in our vans, and they are awful. They are the old BuzzBox type Halfords plug-in charger, and they will happily charge, and they're insensitive, and they will run the battery beyond its charging limits comfortably, and you'll just dry it out. It will gas. If you've got one and you need to plug in for extended periods of time, I would suggest put it on a timer. You know, 1 day, a week, a couple of hours for a day. Just keep it down, because it will destroy your batteries. Now, someone came to me yesterday and said, the 99 model, or the one which has solar capability, by the way, ignore that, that's only 2 amps, it's not worth it. But anyway, that apparently is half intelligent. It doesn't go above 13.6 volts. Yes, there you are. And I think we have German documentation, which I will read to you afterwards. However, the thing is with batteries, they need what they call a boost charge. They need a bit of a hit. An alternator, a perfect alternator, will give out 14.89 volts. That is a really good charge. And it's on when the engine's on, and it's not intelligent, but that's what it does. Now, batteries don't like being held at 15 volts for too long, really. There is a maintenance charge which is 13.6, and this holds the battery at its optimum happy point. And that's what an intelligent charger does. It gives it a good squirt and then eases back, and that keeps it in top health. Those old things, they don't. The technology was not available at the time to cost-effectively build smart chargers. I mean, semiconductor technology at the time was still a bit young. The same with inverters. They weren't available. I wanted to talk about inverters in case I forget. So, the solar controllers I use are the EPEVA. I'm sure you've seen my posts on them. You can get Victron or Morningstar. There's a few makes that are all very good and really expensive. These EPEVAs, from what I see, are about half the price of the equivalents. They are made of extraordinarily good components. I've seen videos of people who spend their time tearing them down and analysing components and stuff. They're good. They're programmable, and they have all the options that you really could need. You should have a temperature sensor so that the batteries are temperature compensated by the charger. What else we got? We've got a remote interface, which is nice, so you don't have big bulky things around the place. EPEVA Tracer series. Oh, they do a new one now that doesn't have the LCD screen, which is significantly cheaper than the one with an LCD screen that is buried and that you never look at. So, if you're in the market for one of them, check that out, and, any doubts, email or post, whatever, it's not a problem. Say again?
How do you spell
EPEVA.
that?
EPEVER. EPEVA. And the Tracer, there's a Tracer A. I'm not quite sure what the new ones are called, but, once you see them, there's plenty of them. 340 watts on a 30 amp.
If you replace that with a Victron smart charger, what do you do with all the fuses? What's in that? There's a bank of fuses.
Yeah, on the 99, I've got to admit, that's not something I have torn apart. So I don't really know. I mean, those things, you just pull them out and use them as fishing weights or something.
But would you have to put an inline fuse to everything, to the pump, the lighting, the fridge, 12-volt fridge? What all them fuses do in that box?
Well, there aren't. Yeah, okay, hang on, let me think. You've only got. That's a conversation for something else. If you've got a Victron, ideally, you want a smart charger for your batteries, not one of those things. The 99s, different conversation. We'll go back to solar panels. The way they're placed, situated on the roof, is important. It's no good having a dirty great roof box and then having your panel next to it. They suffer badly from shadow. If you've got one cell that's in shade, you will lose a lot. This is another reason why generally I do not like putting panels in series. Again, if you're using big ones like I do, one controller, one panel, you got, it's like Titanic bulkheads, you can never fail. But if one bit goes down, you've still got the other one to go. So I've done that a couple of times. The only time you ever really want to consider wiring panels in series is if you've got two small ones and they only generate about 20 volts. If you can get 40 volts out of them, you will get more charge time as the sun goes down. Because, as you get less light, if you've got a 20 volt panel, as that voltage starts creeping down, you get to the point where the losses of the charge controller doesn't have enough volts to actually do anything useful, so it cuts your daytime down. But again, I would rather have a controller on each, because if you're parked up and you've got one in shade, and the other one's open, at least you've still got half of it working. If they're in series, if you knock one out, you lose the lot. I actually put some panels on a 60-foot narrowboat not so long ago, and yeah, that was an important consideration. So you know, they're quite often parked under trees, so to have a panel at the front and a panel further back with individual controllers was a much better chance of keeping things running. So I said someone to remind me about something. Inverters, yeah, inverters. Yeah, these are great things. Our first inverter was a £20, 1,500 watt thing that was about that big. Great for running a NutriBullet, a food blender, that sort of thing. And that was fine. When we went to the aircon, we needed 700 watts continuous. So I got a 3,000 watt old school inverter, which is massive. One of the things the first things I noticed about that inverter when I got it was the size of the cable that ran to it. This is my BMW cable. It's beautiful. It's huge. I mean, you know, you could almost run a village on that sort of stuff. My inverter, the positive and the negative, has this stuff doubled up. It is that thick. And I started looking back at the old V equals IR and power is IV and that sort of stuff. So if you've got a 700 watt device, that is sucking 70 amps out of your battery as a rough calculation. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, that is right. A 300 watt device will take 30 amps. That's a lot of current. You know, you can weld at 30 amps just about. So when these inverters come with these little crocodile clips, it's not really ideal. Again, it's depending on what you're doing with them. You need to really think carefully about where it's coming from. You know, if the solar controller, the charger, the battery, and the feed to the inverter want to be as close as possible. Yeah, I mean, we had the conversation with Terry. If you've got a charger at the back of the van and your battery's at the other end of it, it just is not going to charge unless you use this stuff, which will cost you hundreds. And so the same with inverters. They need to be close, they need to be well cabled, and yeah, well, that is it. Otherwise, again, you're risking fire. People have sort of quite often said, well, I'd like to run a hairdryer. And you can, but if you've got a 1600 watt hairdryer, that's 160 amps out of your batteries. Now that's going to hurt. If you've got 2 batteries, or even 3 batteries, that's a lot of current you're asking. So, you know, to run a hairdryer, even though it's a short blast, you kind of want at least a 3-4 battery system, and you need a serious inverter to do that. You know, the Chinese, they knock these things out left, right, and centre, and I haven't got a clue what is good. I've fitted a couple. When people ask me to fit them, I say, well, look, this is what I think. You buy it, I'll put it in. If it lives, great. Tell me about it, and I might get another one. I don't really know. The one I've got came out of a longboat. It's about 10 years old, weighs a ton, huge transform. Yeah, it's solid. Right, so hang on. So you've got a single letter battery, 120, yeah, standard letter battery. What will I have off it? Probably what I had before, you know. But it depends on what you're running it. I mean, a NutriBullet technically is 700 watts. That's 70 amps, but it is literally less than a minute. You know, a hairdryer, you can get away with it for a minute, but if it's, you know, if it's long hair and it's a 15-minute job. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well I've got 5 batteries, including my engine battery, and I got a 3,000 watt inverter off that, and I don't feel. I mean, I have bothered putting on the aircon and the washing machine and the welder, all that sort of stuff, but I wouldn't worry about drawing 100 amp. Okay. I had a beautiful aircon system that was 1,200 watts. It was beautiful. It was low profile, new, and you turn the thing on, it would freeze within 30, very, very quickly. But the current draw on that was 120 amps, and I was not going to go there because my panels could only just keep up with it. It would have pulled from the batteries. It was just out of spec, which was sad. I don't know if that helps answer that question or not. These little inverters for short blasts, they're great. Little 1,500, a 1,500 watt, £20 inverter should run a NutriBullet. It did for me quite happily, and I'll happily recommend them. And if they die, it's 20 quid. Yeah, so inverters, that's a real difficult one because, people want to run TVs or chargers or laptops. I mean, that's another one. Running through an inverter isn't really ideal. These days you can get DC to DC converters. Everything almost these days runs off USB anyway. So, get yourself some of these things. These are beauts. These are 8 amp. You can charge laptop and everything else off it at the same time. They're not particularly expensive, and it saves you running an inverter to do it. I think that's a bit nuts. My computer, I have on the old system nowadays, I'm just lazy, so I use mains because I can. But my previous computer, when I had 300 watts, I had a little brick. It's a buck step-up converter, and 12 volt comes in, 19 goes out, plugs into the laptop, no inverter needed. So,
Bjorn, could I have a look at those?
Yeah, sure.
You have them back.
Yeah, those ones are particularly good.
The solar panels you were saying that you get from the New Forest, is there some other place that we would get like a more standard one, or if we can't have access to this guy?
Sourcing panels, I mean, they are around. You should be able to get 340 watts in a 2 meter by 1 meter, and if you're looking at around the £200 mark, that's sort of good watts for your pounds, as far as I'm concerned. And that's how I always used to work it out. If I was like, if you got a £1,000 panel and it's 500 watts, that's £2 a watt. That's the wrong way. I want to pay 50p a watt. But horses for courses, I can't really tell. The ones that I get in the source suits, they work. I'm happy with them. So I've not really explored, but I'm sure it's not like it's a £2 investment. So I wouldn't panic too much about it. How are we doing for time, by the way? It's what? 5 to 3. Okay. We ran over a little bit. I think I've kind of covered most of it. So if we have some questions. Sorry, you have to speak louder.
Where do you typically accommodate the extra batteries?
Yeah, extra batteries. It kind of depends on what you're driving. But you can put them, you can get away with having a few in a battery box on the other side. But again, as with all this stuff, you need to think seriously. You can have a battery there, and Fiats, you can get a short battery under the seat, but you might have to cut a cross member out to do it. But then it's in, it's out of the way, and if you've got good battery management, it should last a few years. Oh, one little thing. The MPPT controllers that I use, the air covers, I've also done another modification which I think is really cool. I have a high current 240 volt power supply unit, and what I do is, because the MPPT is an intelligent charger, if I'm plugged up in winter, my house, it's in the north, so I don't get light at all, so I'll plug in. As soon as the mains turns up, it turns this unit on, it pulls over a couple of relays which switches the input to the controller from solar to the output of this power unit. So I can then feed my controller with mains-derived power at 24 or 48 volt, depending on whichever one I have to pick up. So I'm feeling very strong about that because I get a mains-powered intelligent charger basically for free almost, because these things are expensive.
And you need to cover your solar panels then? Like...
Never thought of that. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, just a quick question. We're kind of a bit new to this. When we get the van back home, I just use the hookup cable, plug it into...
Sorry, you have to speak up, Ron.
Sorry, we're kind of new to this, so when we get the van at home, we leave it plugged in with a hookup cable and a adapter into the plug in the garage. Is that wrong? Should we take the battery out and do a trickle charge or something like that?
If you're coming home, parking up the van for a while, if you've got one of those sorts of charger, then you should put it on a timer.
Right.
You know, 6 hours a week or something like that. Personally, if I was leaving something like that up for 2 or 3 months, I would probably get a fly lead from the leisure battery to the engine battery and just give them both a little bit of a pump once a week just to keep them happy.
Before you mentioned about a step-up charger, 12 volts, 17 watt for your laptop.
Yeah.
What was the description? What was that?
If you eBay, they're like buck step up. You can get step up, step down. I mean, these things are basically buck step downs. They go from 12 to 5 volt for USB.
Can you get 12 volts to like 18 volts or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, they come with a little. You can set them. You can get 35 volts out of them. In fact, I've got a slightly bigger one that it cost me all of about 12 quid or something that I think will actually provide something like 10 amps up to maybe even 40 something. So I'm thinking, if I ever manage to afford a nice electric bike, I reckon I can charge that off solar without an inverter. And that would be nice.
Thank you.
What would be the budget cost? I know it says how long is a piece of string to the question of this recommended 340 volt system in terms of labour.
Well, the panels 220-ish, the controller 120-ish, cabling, blocks, bits, pieces, that's probably about another 50 or so. So, it's about, if you do it yourself, it's not about 400 quid, something like that.
Basically, what's your view about the little portable solar panels? Because we plan to be in Spain a lot, and therefore we'll go under trees and things like that in the shade where it's work. So something we can move around a bit seems like a good idea.
Well, those really stealable ones.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very lazy, and I realise that these things you need to kind of orientate and you need to move them around, and they're heavy and bulky and they irritate me. But I am sure that they can be used. It's just if you've got them on the roof, they're likely to fall off, and if you've got them on the ground, some sod might walk off with it. I don't know what to say about it, really. I like the idea. Fit, forget, never look at it again. Any more? Everyone knows everything about 3-stage charging and solar powers and everything. Yeah.
What's 3-stage charging?
That's nothing at all, the first bit and then the last bit.
All right.
I think we've discounted the idea that I can never use my hairdryer because we really don't have room for that many batteries. Serious question, what about straighteners? Because that's kind of important as well. Or have I really got it?
No, that's a good point. No, I think that could be quite a good compromise. What's how are you
I have no
explaining
idea.
this?
That's kind of
We're talking GHDs?
yeah, that kind of thing.
Okay, I reckon they're a couple hundred watts, yeah, could be boost.
So that might work. Because the
Yeah.
USB ones are awful. Genuinely, if we're going to go on the road for a long time and we don't want to go to campsites,
Yeah, but can't you get gas ones?
it's still bad, still not
Yeah.
as good. Yeah.
No, that's a good point, you know, 200 watt.
Or you stick with what you get and get a different wife for shorter hair. Or you stick with what you've got and get a different wife for shorter hair.
Already got straight hair.
You never know, I mean, I've tried it a couple of times. It's real messy, you don't get the tongs. Yeah, one of those little 20 watt inverters, yeah, that will probably do that job quite nicely.
Put it in your bag.
For those of you who don't know, you get pure sine wave, that generally costs a lot more, and you get modified sine wave, which is a real misnomer. It's not modified, it's not a sine wave at all. It's a bloody square wave. It's just straight chop, 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 no smoothing or nothing. Now, in the old days, there are a lot of devices that used to get quite sensitive to, you know, a non-defined zero crossing waveform, and, you know, the electronics would all get a bit peculiar. But it seems that most chargers, for those of you that aren't using these better things, seem to accept a modified square wave okay, but you know, if you find that your modified square wave inverter is not running your TV or your something or you know, quite as you expect, might be because that particular device is sine wave sensitive. I could talk to you about the electronics in that, but you'd hate me.
And is that a sine wave you're getting out of that then?
Well, no, it's a DC.
All right, okay.
Well, you know, technically, I mean, some of these are high frequency switch mode, which, you know, you're getting AC, but it's such a high frequency, you know, God could barely notice it, so we call it DC.
Can you give us an average idea? Because I'm going to suggest that a lot of people might only have somewhere around 100 watt solar panel on their roof.
Yeah.
We're not that techy, we don't know much about it. What can you expect to benefit with, say, something around 100 watts?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, 100 watts is useful. It will keep you topped up. But, you know, if you've got fluorescent and dichroic bulbs, you know, you're fighting a losing battle. If you've LED'd throughout and, you know, you're not using your inverter excessively and, you know, 100 watts is useful. I mean, my little boat, I put 40 watts on it, and I thought it was glorious, because with a sailboat, that's all we had. But all we ran was some LEDs in the evening. I mean, I was even scared to use my car radio that was in it, because that was 5 amps, and I was aware that, well, if you do that, you know, you only get so much before you have to run the engine up. So, it's all about balance, all the way down the line.
Do you know, Bjorn, what the old timers had put on? Because I've got old ones too, and I think they look like they're almost sort of came with the vehicle. Do you have to know what power they are?
Yeah, anything that's sort of over 20 years old, the power output is probably 10 times the square root of bugger all. They don't last forever. And, you know, the original panels were big for a little output. I mean, the output density these days is much better. So, you know, to be fair, I've worked with people and they've had panels that are only 10 years old, but they take up so much space, you just scrap them. You know, stick them on a shed or something where, you know, you've just got a little outside light. That's, you know, old panels. It's not just the age, but, you know, the improvement in what you can get with a new for the money. It's just a no-brainer, really. With small panels, yeah, it's one of these things. The more array, the more elements you have in an array, the more voltage you have. The bigger ones, like you get in the field, they're all about 50 volt. You have to have an MPPT. An MPPT controller is basically a PWM with a buck-to-buck in front of it. So it drops the voltage down, and then it high-frequency chop, pulse width modulation, they call it, a very high-frequency AC, and that sorts your batteries out. The smaller panels, in fact, the really little ones, you just plug them in direct, because they can only produce 18 volts, and there's such a pathetic current. You know, they don't really do much. But I've got nothing against a decent PWM, which is a lot cheaper, and it's what you want to use for panels of work at around the sort of the 20-24 volts. You don't need the MPPT to step it down, but it still does need to have the intelligence of being able to know that I need to charge at 15 volts and then I need to maintain it at 13.6. A lot of these cheap little PWMs, they just bang it out at 13.6. And the way I look at a 13.6 volt charge, it's a bit like if you're doing any long distance swimming or cycling or anything like that. If you're at 5% above your pace rate, you run out of breath, you get tired, and then you collapse when you don't need to. When you run at pace, and everything's happy, you can just carry on and on and on. So it is important for the health of your batteries to work them as they like to be worked. Or, you replace your battery every few years and then suffer the degradation of irritation as it does sort of do that. Right, I think any more?
Yeah. What a second-hand one. It's got 3 solar panels on the roof, all different sizes, 2 leisure batteries, which are both 90.
So we've got 3 random solar panels.
Yeah.
Right, all different sizes.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's an MPPT.
Yeah.
And it goes down to these 2 leisure batteries.
And it goes to 2 leisure batteries.
Yeah. And I just don't know what I can do with that. Can I run off that? I don't know what size these panels are. It's hot seat.
I did say earlier that you can mix and match batteries. Within being sensible. You can't put a huge battery and a tiny battery together. Yeah, okay, but that is not the same as solar panels. If you've got 3 different sized panels, if you want the most out of it, you need 3 different sized controllers. I would not, if you've got 2 panels that aren't the same, you've got one putting out different. I suppose if you stack them in series, but then, if you've got a strong panel and you've got a weak panel, one's going to choke the other. It's just, this is how you got the van, yeah? Yeah, well, unfortunately, a lot of people just chuck things on and think it's great without any understanding of, how these things operate.
So we've managed, we've been here since Thursday. So the colour telly on, it's been on there every day, nearly all day. We're still here,
Yeah, well, it's...
I'm just wondering when it's just going to all fail.
It probably won't. The performance will just tail off, and you probably only... I'm putting figures out of the air here, but I would imagine you're only really getting 50% of what you could do if the system was trimmed properly. That's kind of quite a good analogy, really. It appears to work. I mean, some of the way things are installed is just unbelievable. I think it's like with any technology, everyone's out trying to sell it as quickly as possible, bang it in, move on.
When you look at the panels, you see, more or less see which you had in first, just by looking at the age of them. The oldest one, the small one on the front, not so old one, that's a little bit bigger, and then a bigger one which is a couple of years old at the back. So.
Yeah, well, I would consider just getting a new one. But if you're happy and it works, keep it like it is until you're not happy.
Well, we won't have it for months.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
No worries. Any more? All done? Grand. Well, I hope this helps.